Hello and welcome to South West London's Winter Olympic coverage. My name is John. I'm joined by the two Georges. As you can imagine, it is really cold here. The opening ceremony will be taking place tomorrow at 11 AM British time, but oddly the mixed curling has already begun. We're here to discuss some of the big talking points ahead of the Games. So what we'll begin with, I think, is North Korea's inclusion. What's your stance on that?
It's a controversial one because obviously they only had two athletes actually qualify for the Games. They were both in figure skating. But now, because of the meetings they've had with South Korea, they've got 22 athletes across 4 different sports, including the mixed ice hockey team with the South Korean team as well. I think it's going to be really interesting to see the dynamic between the two Olympic committees on that. George, what do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting framed within the geopolitical context because obviously North Korea have been strengthening their nuclear arsenal quite publicly, which has led to a lot of fear around the world, and this came as a bit of a surprise. Whether or not it's a good sign of things to come, I guess, remains to be seen, but you know, this North Korea have been involved in the past, not necessarily the best results.
Sure, so from one controversy to the next, we'll move on to Russia's involvement in the Games next. George, what's your view on that?
Well, they're still sending the third biggest delegation. They're sending, I think, 168 athletes, which is, just behind US and Canada. So they're not a small presence. They're not going away from the Games. It's not a ban here. It's more a punishment on the federation and their Olympic committee rather than the athletes, which I think is right. The athletes that are going are as yet known to be clean, so there's no reason to ban them. Yeah,
and as much as obviously if you've got a clean athlete, they obviously deserve to be competing. However, the state-sponsored doping ran so deep, I guess we haven't really seen the full consequences, full conclusions haven't been drawn yet, so whether there are still doped athletes remains to be seen again.
So do you think the IOC should have taken the risk? Should they be competing?
It's hard to say, but my own personal opinion, I don't think they should be.
Sure, and we'll have a quick word now on Team GB's hopes. Obviously they've set that target of 5 medals, which is ambitious, but justifiably so, I think. Elise Christie leading the way. She's going to be competing in more than one event, I believe.
3, yeah.
3 events, and so let's talk about the other hopefuls. Who are you looking forward to watching?
I'm looking forward to seeing Katie Ormerod. She's a snowboarder. She's 20 years old. She's going to be in big air and slope style. Finals for slopestyle are on Monday. She's got a very good chance of winning gold, we think. So yeah, it's going to be really good to see her. I'm also looking forward to, there's the Nigerian women's bobsleigh team, and also Peter Taufatafuwa, who you may remember from the Rio Games as the Tongan flag bearer. He's now competing in the Winter Olympics.
And from an entertainment perspective, we've got Billy Morgan going to the Games, and he recently completed the world's first quad cork, which for a British snowboarder is pretty unprecedented territory, so I'm looking forward to seeing him.
Sure, well that's all we have time for, unfortunately. Thanks for joining me, guys. We're going to go get into the warm and thaw out, so we'll leave you in the very capable hands of our studio team, who are going to run through all of Team GB's medal chances.
Hello and welcome back to the studio for the second part of South West London's Winter Olympic special. It's James, Peter, Joe and Alex here in the studio. We've produced an Olympic supplement with some fantastic stories inside, so we're going to go through the best of Team GB's hopefuls. On the front page, held up by Peter here, we have Team GB's biggest hope, Elise Christie, and he will now tell us more.
Yeah, Elise Christie's on the front. Of course, she is Team GB's biggest hope this Winter Olympic Games. And in this article she talks about how she's willing to risk going through the hell of Sochi all over again. Of course, in Sochi she was disqualified 3 times in all 3 of her events, despite being, again, a strong medal hope, and then afterwards also suffered a barrage of social media abuse because in the 500 metres she took out South Korea's Park Sung-hee. But she says she's willing to risk going through all of that again in order to get success, and that's despite the pressure she's under. Of course, she's targeted 2 medals of Team GB's 5 that they're expecting, so she really is, she says she's unfazed by it, but she also adds in page 2, she's not fazed at all by the pressure. And also on page 2 is Charlotte Gilmartin at the bottom. She talks about being the underdog, the unknown quantity, if you like, of short track speed skating, in the same way that Laura Dees is in skeleton.
Yeah, and Laura Dees is one of our stories on page 3, along with Lizzie Arnold. And it's quite an interesting one, really, because Laura Dees is Team GB's biggest medal hope for these games, despite Yarnold being sort of the more outspoken one on drugs, especially Russian doping in the last 4 years since she won her skeleton gold in Sochi in 2014. But Dees is kind of, I guess, a reflection of the fact that the Winter Olympics is an ego-free environment. You know, there's her and Yarnold have used their sort of lofty position as quite high-profile Winter Olympic athletes to really not push their own agenda or anything like that. The skeleton gets going on Monday. The first medals are given out on Friday the 16th. And now we're going to go over to Joe, who's going to talk about a couple of sports which will be a family affair.
Yeah, so page 4 covers the Muirheads and the sister act of the Summer Haze. And the Winter Olympics are no stranger to family ties. I mean, we've got Lloyd Wallace, who's a freestyle skier, competing this year. His dad, Robin Wallace, was in the 1988 Calgary Olympics. So there's been family ties in the past. This year we have the Muirheads. We have Eve, who's in her 3rd Olympics. She'll be looking to get a gold this year, I think. In Sochi, she got a bronze. And her brothers join her. So we have Glenn and Thomas. They're joining her as part of the rink. They'll be in the men's competition. They follow in the footsteps of their dad, Gordon, who was a Scottish champion. He mentions in this piece how he wishes he was a bit more experienced and athletic in his days. I think he mentions a cigarette before his last competition. And then we also have the Summer Hazes sisters, who are freestyle skiers. I mean, they're not hopefuls for a medal, but they'll be looking to compete with each other. They say they're very competitive. They'll be hoping they can get up the ranks this year as well. So we'll be rooting for the families in PyeongChang.
Yeah, fantastic. And another family affair is Lloyd Wallace, whose father, I believe, competed in the Winter Olympics. Alex is going to tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so on page 6 we've got the story of Rowan Cheshire and Lloyd Wallace, who are 2 young freestyle skiers who have both suffered their fair share of injuries early in their careers. Cheshire suffered her big injury in the warm-up to the last games in Sochi when she smashed her face against a half pipe during a training run, and she was rendered unconscious and therefore out of the game. So this time around she's really making up for lost time in that respect, and she's talked about the challenges faced with her recovery and building her confidence to return to the snow. And Wallace last August suffered his injury after leaving a ramp and catching an edge which sent him completely off balance at 70 kilometers an hour. This led to him being airlifted to hospital, and amazingly he suffered no major injuries, but his recovery did take 2 months, but he's now back in training for 4 months now, and he is well on the way to challenging for a medal, although Rowan Cheshire's the more likely probably to get on the podium. And then the bottom story here is about Mika McNeil, who set up a GoFundMe page in September to raise money for the 2 women bobsleigh team after it was revealed by the sports governing body that their funding was to be completely cut, despite funding being maintained for the 3 men's teams. She set a target of £30,000 to raise for to go to PyeongChang, and that amount has been vastly exceeded. They're on 42,000 now, and the decision was even more incredible because Mika Moore and Mika McNeil competed together at the World Junior Championships and won gold last January. So the decision was met with outrage by many people across the sport.
Yeah, well, that shows really the real mix of stories that we have here, and I think we'd all like to see the guys that we've just spoken about get a medal in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, thank you for joining us, and all that's left is to enjoy the next 2 weeks of Winter Olympic action.